So, Lycan, while you're setting up, I have something really important to inform you of. Do you remember? Do you know how this debate started?
Saw a reply to your tweet, or you replied to a tweet, and I said, "Would you like to talk about this?"
Yeah. So, what did you think of that tweet? It was about the billboard in Philly that said we should forgive violent criminals and
Well,
stand with them.
well, I mean, isn't that what we're here to discuss?
Yeah. I have some important information about that billboard.
Oh, well, because the way I wanted to start this off is I don't give a shit about the billboard.
Okay.
I figured we'd baseline ourselves to make sure that because I tried looking it up, and that organization, it exists in like Florida, and I don't think it has anything to do with what that billboard is anyway. I think it's fake. I don't think that's real. Is
So
that what
you're correct. Yeah. So there is an organization called Citizens for Sanity. That's like an environmentalist organization out of Florida. And then the one in Philly is a conservative organization that's taking the piss. So I just thought it was funny that this whole debate started on a billboard campaign taking the piss. But I still think it's an interesting conversation, the forgiveness for criminals. They do a few other ones that are like, we must protect pregnant men for climate change or whatever, and buy buy billboards and put them up. So I think that's pretty cute.
My God. Yeah. So I saw that and I went to research it a little more because I'm like, if we're going to discuss that, I should know what the organization is.
Yeah.
Can I swap us? Hold on. I'm trying to see what I can do with these because, okay, I have to look left to look at you. All right. But yeah, so let me pull up that tweet real quick.
Yeah, I put it up for people to look at on my end, but I can read it again if you need a refresher.
Oh no! So the billboard says violent criminals deserve our compassion and respect. We don't care about this fall part, but that is our thesis. Violent criminals deserve our compassion and respect. And you replied with, "Kill someone deserving of compassion. Different political views, subhuman scum." Mm-hmm. Now, granted, on your reply, I can agree with that because it's really fucking annoying when it's like, we'll have all this compassion for criminals, or we'll have all these compassions for people in all these different socioeconomical circumstances, but someone has differing political views and they can't even muster enough compassion to recognize how beneficial it is to their own cause to have compassion. We're not getting anywhere with conservatives by treating them like they're dumb rubes, So,
yeah. Okay. Wow. Okay. We're going to agree on this a lot more than maybe I initially thought, because my problem isn't necessarily the idea of having compassion for criminals. I think I'm a Christian, so I think compassion is something we need to give to all people, lest we not be deserving of it ourselves. The only reason that we have any worth or love or anything in this world is because God has forgiven us of our sins, because we are flawed human beings, but thank goodness for compassion, thank goodness for forgiveness, and we should never withhold that from other people. However, certainly I don't think we should respect violent criminals. Respect should be held for those who deserve it. And then certainly I think the hypocrisy is what bothers me the most. You'll have these people they'll find it very easy, as you were just pointing out, to forgive ISIS. They'll find it easy to forgive mass murderers. They'll find it easy to forgive criminals. A few weeks ago, there was a woman who had a man shooting into her apartment, and there was a huge standoff with police, and police went in and shot the guy, and there were protests outside the house over the police shooting the guy, and they were all raising money for this guy who was shot and the family. And this woman went outside. It was a Hispanic woman, and she was like screaming, "Why are you supporting this man? My kids and I thought we were gonna die. We're thankful the police came to help us." And they basically told her to shut up and go away. And his fundraiser was getting more money than the woman who was terrorized. And it's like just wild the way our society responds to crime, and finds it so easy to respond and be forgiving of individuals who have done horrific things, so long as it's politically expedient or makes it look good, make them look forgiving in the public eye. So George Floyd, all of these police interaction individuals. But then it's as simple as being compassionate towards a Republican, and no bueno, not going to happen, right? So I find that hypocrisy just like soul destroying, and I don't think it has anything to do with these people having ounce of forgiveness or compassion in their system, but everything to do with the fact that our concept of good, compassion, and forgiveness is entirely coming from the idea of what is popular to say publicly. People aren't actually being compassionate. They're just saying what they're supposed to say publicly.
So I agree with a lot of that.
Yeah.
I haven't heard about this situation that you're talking about with the person. Do you remember one of the people's names involved? Just I'm not like source checking you.
No. It would actually be worthwhile to play on stream. It's a really quite a tragic story. Luckily, when it blew up on Twitter a bit, you had some people like Actual Justice Warrior and myself and much bigger people than us sharing the video, and her fundraiser eventually did exceed the criminal's fundraiser, but at the start, he was winning. But I'll share the tweet with you and play it on stream so people can check it out. I'll just have to go on the scroll. It's a bit far back in my timeline.
But while you do that,
yeah,
I do want to see this just to see it, but I figure that we could have a discussion because maybe we don't agree and we can just talk about it. But I do want to talk about how we view our criminal justice system, because I imagine that there are going to be some disagreements between you and I, even where we can agree with like the liberal hypocrisy about how they can give compassion to this group but not that group. I think where we might disagree is how prisons ought to be viewed by those who aren't in prison, and how we ought to treat criminals in the criminal justice system once they've been processed and entered the prison system.
Right. Okay, I just shared that tweet with you, so I'm going to play that on screen for everyone watching, and then we can dive into that. All right, guys. I think I've shown you this once before on stream, so if you're paying attention, you would have... if you're keeping up with your streams, guys, you'll know what we're talking about here. Here's the video. So this woman had her house shot into by this criminal. You've got all of these protesters out here that are defending the guy who was shot, essentially, and calling the police, pigs for shooting him. And this is the interaction.
It was a terror. I'm sure it was a terror. This is not okay. You're alive. Shut up.
Did you hear that? They literally scream at her, "You're alive, shut up," after she's been sitting there terrorized with her kids being shot at.
Grief in silence. This is not okay. This is not a George Floyd situation. George Floyd was unarmed. He was unarmed.
You're alive. Sorry.
This is not okay. My kids have to deal with this and probably have a mental illness now because they almost lost their life. There's bullet holes in my kitchen because he sat in the fucking hallway watching my move.
This family wishes this never happened.
I wish it never happened either. I don't have a place to call home. I can't sleep that night.
She's obviously going through a moment.
This is not okay.
I love how they say too, like she's obviously going through a moment, like she's having some sort of like woman moment. Oh, she's on her period. She's emotional after she said her kids have been shot at, and they're like, oh, the bullets didn't go through you though. Unbelievable. I hate these people. I highly dislike these people. I try not to use the word hate.
She's obviously going through a moment.
Yeah, I saw that clip the other day.
Yeah.
Now I know what that was part of. I couldn't watch all of it. Like I got through a couple seconds of it and it was like, okay, I can't.
It's hard. It's hard to watch. And then the fundraiser honoring the guy who shot at her, $14,000, and then her fundraiser, $1,000.
Oh, did he die?
Yeah, well, the cops, it was a standoff. They tried to get him to surrender, but obviously when he's shooting at children and won't stop, they have to go in and do something. So
now the only thing I can say is I don't know, and I don't want to litigate it here, but I don't know anything about his side, like what he was doing. But I do agree that just on the face value, like the idea of them, if he was threatening this chick and her family, and that's how it went down, and then people are showing up for him, protesting his death when he was clearly committing a crime. It sounds like, again, I have to say that to be responsible. I haven't seen what he did exactly, but yeah, I fully empathize with that woman, and it's fucking gross. Yeah,
so that's what I mean when I talk about like my frustration with the perspective that people have on crime. They're so willing to defend criminals that they'll burn down entire cities over it. And somehow there'll be no sympathy for the shop owners or the single mothers or whatever that are having their livelihood destroyed in their riots. But they have all the sympathy in the world for Jacob Blake, who was stalking and sexually harassing a woman and got shot by the cops. But yeah, none left for the real victims. And I think it's entirely because, once again, what we view as good in society today is no longer what is actually good, because doing good usually means doing something that is uncomfortable, doing something that isn't necessarily popular. You might be judged by your peers. You might be financially reprimanded for doing good. Our concept of doing good is what is going to be the most socially expedient for me? What are people going to think looks good? It's all about the external image and nothing about what is genuinely the right thing to do.
I agree with you there too. Our system of, well, I guess, I don't know if there's an official name for it, but our informal system of inner social justice, where we do judge with our wallet and our associations and all that stuff. It's very skewed, and I think you do hit the nail on the head. And it's, well, we're going to tie this to where I want to go with this conversation, which is, should the justice system be retributive or reformative or retributive?
Retributive, is that the word? I think.
Yeah, retributive. Like, are we? Is this about vengeance, or is it about reform and fair punishment? And I think that if you want a huge hypocrisy, is that people on my side, the progressives, want to give all of this leeway to so many different types of criminals, yet they can't even show basic human compassion towards people that might have had some sort of reasonable fuck up in their life. An insensitive tweet, a heartless comment, a joke that was a joke, but hey, the mob has decided that joke was unsavory and therefore you should be punished. Before we go to that, I want to baseline ourselves. But before we do that, I need your help with something.
Yeah. What's up?
Do I want Szechuan shrimp, teriyaki chicken, Hunan chicken, or crispy beef?
I'm going to say no to the shrimp. We don't eat bugs. These are sea bugs. This is a 2000 IQ take, by the way.
First
you want to get the crispy beef for sure.
You chose right. This place has amazing crispy beef.
I know. If you, what's the ginger beef? Ginger beef is always the best pick at an Asian restaurant.
I've never seen ginger beef. Is that like a Canadian Chinese thing?
Maybe, I don't know. That's a great question. I would imagine Canadians put a great twist on it. I love when people go out of the way to be like, oh, we need mass immigration because immigrants make such great food. It's like, we have the recipes. We have the recipes. And we can make them even better.
No, I disagree. Listen, I can go on 1,000 different websites and get all these different curry recipes, but no one is putting there. Here's the thing. There is a certain amount of love and passion and centuries of experience passed down from one to the other that on certain traditional dishes, you can't beat it. Like, sure, a white person could learn to fucking do it, but they're not doing it. You got to
go to their home country to get that love. Because if you go here,
full on, yes. But it's the same thing for Italians. Like, you got to go to Italy to get, the proper handmade daily pasta, unless you're paying out the ass at a really nice restaurant. Mm-hmm. But you know what? If some fucking dude named Giacomo is fucking making my pasta and red sauce, and it's a little Americanized, you know what? I still like that fucking Giacomo is making it. And welcome to America,
apparently, ginger beef is in fact a Chinese-Canadian recipe that came from Calgary. Love that. Snaps for Canada.
The reason I asked that is because England, I've learned, doesn't have General Tso's chicken. That's a totally American fucking thing.
I didn't know that.
Do you have General Tso's in Canada?
Nope.
Okay, see? Yeah, exactly. But that is one of the most fucking popular dishes in America. It's a spicy, supposedly Szechuan-esque dish, and no one else has it, and it's one of the best. So when you come to America next, you have to try it.
All right, we'll do. All right, okay, did you order your damn food so we can get to the conversation?
I'm doing it right now.
Okay,
so
great.
When we talk about the premise of the conversation, what I want to talk about is whether or not criminals ought to deserve compassion and respect. And what that means to me is, once you're in the system, how are you treated by the system? And what is the purpose of you being in the system?
Yeah. Well, okay, so everyone likes to talk about this, what is the purpose? Is it retributive? Is it reformative? Is it, to me, a lot of that can be I'll delve into it with you because I do think there are interesting aspects, but a bit of that can be a circle jerk conversation when really the reason we're putting people in jail is to keep them away from other people. Like, if you are a violent offender, we want you off the streets. We want you unable to do those things to another individual. It doesn't even have to be, is this about revenge? Is this about reformation? It doesn't have to be that question. It's just like, these people clearly cannot engage with other humans in a respectful manner that, is within line of what we have decided the laws and morality of this nation are. So, see ya. Get behind a cell. And there is like a degree of conversation of like, how long do we keep them away? And if we release them, are they going to reoffend? And this is also a huge problem, certainly in states where people try to focus more on let's humanize the criminal. We don't want to take their whole life away, this, that, and the other. And there is an aspect and an interesting conversation to have there. But sometimes you get this revolving door in prisons where it's like, all right, give them another chance, give them another chance, give them another chance. And then they just get more chances to horribly ruin people's lives.
There's a reason for that, though. And that's, I mean, so like, it sounds like this is the conversation to have, which is we agree with the reason why people end up behind bars. They end up behind bars because they have done something wrong. And they need to be separated from the rest of the class because they have shown themselves they can't be. But now the next piece is the follow through. It is, what is the most humane way to treat these people? And what is our goal with putting them in prison? The initial goal, yes, is to separate them from society and get them away from, further offending that crime. But we have to do the follow through. Once we've got to that point, as you said, someone does a lot of these crimes are only getting them, depending on how many offenses they have or the severity of the offense, they're only going to jail for 1 to 10 years, maybe 15 years, whatever. And we have high recidivism rates in the United States.
It's like over 80%, someone in the chat just mentioned.
And so the next thought is, and shouldn't just be, well, they're criminals, they keep fucking up, fuck them. And if they fuck up enough, they stay there for the rest of their life because they're still going out and committing crimes. And it's not good for society. And I don't think it's good for the soul of our nation to just treat people like, a lot of these, for all intents and purposes, these prisons are free slavery for the state.
I agree. I don't
government.
disagree with that. Yeah.
So my belief is that the goal should be to separate them from society and then reform them, to make sure that for their sake, they might be able to come to some level of corrective nature and be able to reintegrate into society, that prisons don't get to profit off that kind of slave labor. And then we prevent them from going back into prison. We release people from prison systems as better people. I think that's good for the nation.
Okay, so I think the question then comes down to what do you view that correction as, right? One of the most difficult things for me as a parent has been learning punishment, learning that I can't just give a child everything they want and have them grow up to be healthy, polite members of society, right? My instinct is I want to buy you all the toys in the world. I want to give you all the cuddles in the world, even when okay, so my son has a habit right now where I'll buy him cars. He's obsessed with cars, all the little Hot Wheels, and he throws them out the window of the car. He just thinks it's hysterical, off a boat, out the window. And I'm like, for a long time, I was like, oh my gosh, you're out of cars. I'll buy you more cars. I'll buy you more cars. And I kept buying him more cars and being like, oh, I love you. I love you. I love you. And then eventually I'm like, holy, he is not learning to respect the things he owns. Like there needs to be some sort of consequence here. There needs to be. So now it's like you throw them out, bye. You're not getting another one. And, your toys are getting cleared out of the room for a bit until you learn to respect the things you have. And that has been really, really difficult. But the truth is, punishment works. If we want to talk about correcting people, if we want to talk about trying to set them on the right path, you got to be harsh sometimes if you love people.
Sure.
And, I'm no lover of violent criminals, but I too don't want to see them getting released over and over and over again and committing more crimes and victimizing more people. And to an extent, they have to learn when they do this, it hurts. We can't have a prison system that is like a vacation, which it is in some places. There has to be a level of punishment.
Can I have
go
2
ahead.
seconds to get I want to get a notepad.
Yeah.
Don't look at my butt.
Mr. T in chat said, I went to prison in 2011 for assault, and it made me completely change my life. I am nothing like I was then and now, although I was 18 then, so maybe age has helped too. Yeah, we had another chatter that said something about, no, I lost the chat. It was good. It was about just like removing people from society for the time of their life where they're most likely to offend, and then, giving them time to reconsider their actions and maybe age a bit. Because age does have a massive amount of impact on impulse control, which crime is highly linked to. Impulse control, although, is also a biological genetic thing. So that's a bit difficult to approach. Ooh, can't be having those conversations. But there are a lot of things that come with age that help as well.
All right. So criminals need punishment, right? But before we do that, I want to talk about the nature of prison. So I do want to return to the criminals need punishment part, but let's talk about what prison is like. Do you think that rape should be possible in prison?
This was one of the first reasons I got involved with politics, was talking about men's issues and talking about how common and horrific rape in prison was for men. Men who had maybe had a bad moment in a bar fight and end up in jail and then get horrifically traumatized for the rest of their life by being raped. And I think that's a horrific, horrific thing.
So I think that almost everything we're going to do a few more of these questions. I assume that you're going to agree with me on almost all of these.
Okay.
Go for it. Shoot. Gangs be able to function in prison?
I mean, should humans be able to breathe air? It's like, that's going to happen.
No. Hold on. Well, let's not talk about whether or not it's going to happen. Should the KKK, the neo-Nazis, the Bloods, the Crips, and any other gang you can think of, should any kind of violent criminal organization be able to function within prison?
No, but even if you don't give it a name, people are going to gravitate towards the group that they feel can protect them within prison.
Sure.
It doesn't. Yeah.
We're not there yet.
Okay.
So we agree that rape should not be happening. Violent criminal organizations should not be.
Yeah, and world hunger shouldn't exist. But yes, keep going.
Well, hold on, because all right. Do you know what the utopia fallacy is?
All right, go ahead. Utopia fallacy.
It's where you dismiss any type of solution because you think it's. I'm not good at phrasing it because I never call the fallacies by their names. But it's basically where, like, when I say should this exist, you say, well, no, but neither should world hunger. It's like, okay, hold on.
Okay, well, maybe
the idea.
Maybe instead of asking me, like, approach it with we both agree, because we both agree. I remember when I was taken in for questioning by the British government under the Terrorist Act, and they asked me, they were like, how do you feel about driving Muslims over with buses? And I was like, oh, how do I feel about kicking puppies? Like, don't be stupid,
Okay, so well, then you stop me if I say something we don't both agree on, okay?
Okay, there we go.
So we got the rapes and gangs down. We both agree that guards who intentionally allow people to get assaulted in any form ought to be punished?
I mean, there are cases where it's like a pedophile murderer, and I'm like, you know what? Well, to adhere to the laws of the land, yes, they should be punished, but I morally understand why they would turn a blind eye. I understand
what part of Christian values supports that?
I understand on an emotional level why they would turn a blind eye to certain situations like that.
That is an okay statement.
There we go.
But when I talk about prison reform, and this is one of the reasons when I say violent criminals do deserve compassion and respect, it's that we understand that those are human beings. And if we would not wish for good people to be raped or assaulted, we should not be okay with these criminals being raped or assaulted. And on a Christian level, which I no longer am, but grew up and well-versed in, that is not okay.
Yeah, sure. Like wishing, okay, so C.S. Lewis obviously covers this really well, where he talks about the idea that being a Christian or believing in compassion or forgiveness does not necessarily mean you don't believe in the idea of punishment. It doesn't mean you don't even believe in the idea of hangings, but you should take no joy in watching that happen to someone. So if someone is hanged for a crime because they're a mass murderer and they must be taken out of society, yes, that punishment is necessary. And he even talks about, he's like, if I did something like that, I would want death upon myself. In fact, it would be a way to correct or atone for my actions. And the only thing is, you shouldn't take joy. You shouldn't take joy in watching someone else's suffering. That's when you've sinned in your heart.
So I think that to a degree, that's a cop-out. What I don't want to do is get sidetracked by, I don't want to get sidetracked with a theological debate because even when I was a kid and still very Christian, I was against the death penalty. And even though the Bible gives permission to, take a life, it was something that I was very against.
Sure.
So I think we can draw the line at, as a Christian, we ought not allow people to be raped and assaulted extrajudiciously.
Sure. All right.
Okay.
Continue with the thought. Okay.
So there's all these things that are bad in prison, right? That we agree that shouldn't happen in prison.
Yeah.
So let's say prison is. So does that prison in your eye become a vacation when they have 3 squares a day and they're not being assaulted or attacked or raped or abused by guards?
It depends on the prison. There are some that are better than others. I've known people who have gone to prison. Some will speak very high. Some people actually preferred prison to being outside of it.
No, sure. But what I'm saying is
it really depends on where. If there are prisons where that is happening, of course I'm against it. But it would be a case by case basis. Of course, there are prisons where that is happening, and the ones where
it happens a lot.
Yeah.
And I'm not. I hate using anecdotes as this happens a lot. But there's plenty of fucking data out there about prison abuse.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to go off my anecdotes and say I had a buddy who was a prison guard in Kansas, and he was a correctional, sheriff's deputy or whatever. Shit happened all the time. It's why he left law enforcement altogether. I had this guy show up when I was a government contractor, and he bragged about there was a name for it. It's something stupid like prison justice or guard justice or something like that. And it was about letting a fucking guards intentionally leaving these people in situations where they can get killed. Jeffrey Dahmer, for all intents and purposes, was a victim of that. And we all know Jeffrey Dahmer's crimes. We don't know how wrong it was, but there is no excuse for guards who are there to protect the prisoners for all intents and purposes. The people on the outside, those are the ones who are making sure they don't get out. But the ones that are in there on the day-to-day are there to protect them. And I think it's a betrayal of their duty to allow that to happen. But the point being is that in this hypothetical where we've dealt with all of those violence and assault and misbehavior from guards, what is the punishment of prison? It's the separation from society, right? It is the separation from your family, your friends. Freedom is taken away from you. That is the punishment, right?
Yeah, but I don't think prison is a strong enough punishment for some people. I think for someone like Dahmer, you need to have
we can go to the death penalty, sure. But what I'm saying is, for those who we have deigned prison worthy, the punishment is the separation from society and the loss of freedoms.
Yeah.
Okay. And we agree that those bad things that make prison fucking terrifying should not be happening.
It's funny, though, because if you speak to people who have been involved in lived lives where there has been a threat of prison doesn't actually scare them. They'll keep committing many of their crimes. They'll continue on if it's just separation from society. And all intents and purposes, they're already separated from society when you're living a life of crime. You're not functioning by the same standards. You're working in different crowds. You're in the underworld. You're barely a part of normal society, and separating yourself for a bunch of people that are part of your underworld anyways. The only fear that comes with that is really the way you're going to get treated in prison in a lot of cases, unless you're at the top echelon of the criminal class where you're, driving yachts around and whatnot. But if you're at the bottom, if you're the guy that's breaking into cars or assaulting people in the streets, robbing them with a pocket knife, prison, if the only punishment is just separation from society, a free meal and a free bed and watching TV and going to the workout room, that might actually be a heck of a lot better than your normal day-to-day life in a lot of cases.
So here's where the compassion comes in. So we've agreed that prisons should not be places where that shit happens. And the number of prisons where that doesn't happen is probably non-existent.
I don't necessarily agree with the idea that there shouldn't be prison fights. I don't necessarily agree. I think we should have more bar fights in general. I think we should have more punch-ons in general in society.
Think that
and in
people
prisons,
should be able to
certainly.
call in hits? Do you think people should be able to call in hits on other prisoners? Do you think that guards should be able to assault prisoners? Do you think all that stuff we just talked about, you just agreed that shouldn't be happening?
When it comes to prison rape, of course, I think that's wrong. I think that should be prevented. When we talk about murdering people in jail, of course, I think that is wrong. That shouldn't be happening. When it comes to men dealing with each other using fists sometimes, I'm not talking
about a fist fight. I'm talking about a violent assault. I'm talking
a
about
fist fight
5
is a
guys
violent
jumping
assault.
someone. I'm talking about 5 guys jumping on someone and beating him within the inch of his life.
No, of course I don't think that's okay. But
Okay.
when it comes to like roughing each other up a little bit, I think we need a bit more of that in society, if I'm being honest.
I don't agree with you. I think that it's better for people to learn to fucking be emotionally intelligent and actually learn to communicate with one another.
The reason people move to fists in situations is because communication has reached a point where it's impossible.
That's a very okay. We're gonna get sidetracked. We can have that debate. We can have debates about violence another time. And you say that as a Marine, I'm very happy to talk about violence. I believe there is violence that we absolutely ought to engage in as a society. But the point I'm making here is we agree that those things should go away. Then we agree that prison suddenly becomes, sure, a little less scary, but the ultimate punishment and the point of prison, even without the systemic issues, is to go be separated from society, spend time away, and lose freedoms. And that's really what it comes down to. Here's the list of crimes. Here's the amount of time you lose your freedoms, right? Now, when we move on from that, the next thing is your point, which is, well, now they look at it as a vacation, or they're just getting, their 3 squares and a cot, and it's just time away. Well, for some people, that time away is enough. For some people, being there for 5 years is enough to be like, fuck, man, I don't want to go back to that. Now, does the other shit we talked about influence that as well? Absolutely. But that's not a world we want to live in. That's a world we agree that ought not exist. So what do? This is where compassion comes in. We need to spend money and resources to better these people so that they don't go back. Because we agree, probably, that, okay, well, cool, now that prison rape is gone, I guess every sentence should be raised 20 years because that's the only way that people are going to suffer. Are we putting people in prison to suffer? Or are we putting there to give them a punishment? And we hope that they don't go back there.
What is the reformative step? We give them a bunch of counselors and hope to God that the counselor can convince them, raping a little girl was wrong. This is the thing. They typically know what they did was wrong to begin with.
Absolutely. But we give them mental health professionals. We give them educational resources. We have a ton of capabilities.
Wait, you think you can educate people into, like, this is why I always found it funny when this is why I always found it funny when feminists suggested like anti-rape education in universities and stuff. It's like, everyone knows rape is wrong. Everyone knows it's wrong. If they're doing it, they're doing it in spite of knowing it's wrong. And if you have no moral, like, you have to bring in like a priest to teach them morality and hell or something in order to get them to believe that doing something wrong is truly wrong. It's not going to be a counselor and education system.
So what do you think rape should be an immediate life sentence? Because that's all, it's either that or we find ways that we reform these prisoners.
You know what? Some of the tribal and Middle Eastern responses to rape might be onto something with that one.
My point is that if you want to go to the extreme examples, there's one of 2 options. It's either we do reformative steps or we lock them up for life. So I think you start raising a bunch of punishments to life sentences, or you start to reform them, and that requires counseling, education, life skills. There's so many different things that we can do for these prisoners that prevent them from coming back and reoffending.
So how do you convince a rapist that what they did is wrong and release them into society with the comfort that they won't do it again? Like, can you take me through a step-by-step of how you would do that?
I absolutely cannot, because I'm not a mental health professional.
Well, this is the problem. There are a lot of things where people will say, like, oh, there's so much more we could do about X, Y, Z. We shouldn't be doing what we're doing right now. But then there's the reason we're doing the things we do right now, the reason the systems work the way they do right now, although I think a lot of them are broken, it tends to be because we haven't thought of anything better yet. So there's this leftist progressive idea of deconstructionism. We need to deconstruct the system we have, but then you don't have anything to replace it with.
No, I am saying explicitly, counseling is a huge, huge factor. Like, we don't have to go to the most violent criminals. We can talk about people who are violent B&E offenders, repeat offenders. We can talk about people who are wife beaters. We could talk about people who are, I don't know, fucking gang members and things like that. Like, these people are people that can, through counseling and education, be reformed. And it's not something that we need the prison system to prove this out. This is something that happens in society in this day and age. The school districts and the municipalities that invest in reform over punishment have highly reduced recidivism rates.
Okay, do
So
you
why
have?
not
Can you
implement
point me?
that?
Can you point me to some of the systems or some of the studies you have that show that? Because I'd be very curious to see like what methodology they use for approach. As you know, there are a lot of liberal suggestions for how we should change policing, how we should do this, and they say, oh, if you just sent like a mental health professional to speak to this criminal that's like holding up a family with a gun, they can help it
not
instead of a cop. I
advocating
know
for
you're
that
not. I know
stupid
you're not.
shit.
I know you're not. But I'm just explaining why I would have kind of a very
So
a
here's the thing that
sensitivity to hearing these suggestions, because often you get this utopian idea of the powers that counselors have that aren't necessarily to the extent that leftists would like them to be. Counselors typically work for people who want to see counselors, right? And that's actually always been in the counseling process. If you go to a counselor, they will tell you, I can't force anyone to come to counseling. We can't make anyone do it. They have to call in and they have to be a part of it. They like it's a whole thing within the counseling profession that there's basically no point to our job if the person doesn't want to be here.
There are going to be people that do not want to participate, that want to put their head down, that want to cover their ears and don't want to engage with it. But if you create incentives that aren't violent, if you create an environment that is nurturing and encouraging of people to engage with these resources, you're going to have far more participants. And then you are therefore going to have more positive results when it comes to the prison system working. And yeah, sure, when prison systems don't have rape and assault and gang violence and all this other stuff, guard assault and violence hanging over their heads, yeah, some things might be judged to need to be raised, you know, the amount of time someone spends in there, because it's not going to be enough. But one thing that I had as a conservative that I've kind of let go of, it was the idea that I want people to go to prison because I want them to feel pain. And when I was against the death penalty, I talked to my mom about this. I was like 12 or something. And I said, you know, I don't like the death penalty. And my mom was like, what if I was murdered? And my opinion didn't change. It was, I still do not like the death penalty. I don't think it's for man to end someone's life for a crime. Let's not even get into the statistics about how often that's incorrect. The rates of executed innocents in America. Mm-hmm. I don't view the prison system as something where I'm cheering and I'm like, fuck yeah, that fucker's going to prison. Fuck him. Like, there are people that you can be glad they're off the streets. There are people that you can be glad are no longer hurting other people. Like Harvey Weinstein going to jail. Awesome, cool. Glad he's not fucking doing any of the shit he was doing. But at the end of the day, I'm not getting a thrill out of him being in prison. I'm not. Yeah, well,
that's exactly what I was saying with the C.S. Lewis stuff, and that's how I feel as well. Like, I don't want people to go to prison or be executed so they can feel pain. I want them to have these things happen to them so they can stop inflicting pain. That's what I want.
So let's even say this. Let's even say you do know that people can be rehabilitated from bad behavior. We're not even going to talk about rates. You just know that a number of people can, right?
Yeah, of course. I absolutely believe that.
So if we have the number of resources paid for and things available to these prisoners proportionate to the number that are going to use it, and we remove the violence out of the prison system that is systemic and not, you know, something that the what stupid leftists would call just being in prison is violence against people. Like, we have none of that other crap in prison. And the people who want to be reformed or can be reformed are given the option to seek it and receive those resources. What are you against?
I like that. I like that idea. If you want to give resources that are, you know, just available for people who genuinely want to seek counseling or reform. I also really enjoy, you know, there are a lot of Christian organizations that go in and will proselytize. Wow, I can't say that word. Wow.
I have no problem with that whatsoever.
You know, they'll go in and they'll give Bibles. They'll speak to prisoners. They'll try to work with them to work out their inner morality. I think that's all a good thing, but it doesn't change the fact that just because forgiveness and compassion exists doesn't mean you don't have to feel the consequences of your actions.
Absolutely. 100%. 1000%. Compassion can exist while still delivering acceptable punishment. My whole thing is I want America to no longer view the prison system as fuck yeah punishment, and they should instead view it as this is the result of your crime, and we hope that you don't come back to the system. I want prisons to be the safest fucking place in the world. I think that no one should fear any of the things we've talked about in prison, especially from guards, but let alone from each other. And if that means we have to pump up the numbers
I think some people feel that the only justice they ever get for, their mother being murdered or friend being raped, whatever it might be, is the way people will be treated in prison rather than what the official system will allow to happen. Quickly, Kevin Wang says chemical castration exists, in a super chat. And then Leon says he is advocating for making victims pay for these services. He wants to give these hardened criminals. No. And you can't just magically end gangs and rape in prison. So that's the one thing that I think is interesting to talk about, is the idea that, through taxation, people can talk about, taxation is willing, but it really isn't. If you're born into a country, you're basically just forced from birth to be indebted to the government and pay them stuff. And when you've been a victim, social contract, whatever. When you've been a victim of a crime, and then a lot of leftists come up with this kumbaya idea of, we're going to provide all of these really lovely services for these people to reform them. And you're sitting there and you're the one who has to take the brunt of the bill for giving this person their counseling services, this and that.
Let me help a brother out. Okay. Mm-hmm. If you're worried about the cost of prisons, cool. You know how we really reduce that? Reduce the number of people that are wrongfully imprisoned. Reduce the number of people that are returning to prison. So everything I'm suggesting is going to inevitably save the taxpayers money.
Okay, so can you provide, and I guess perhaps this is this is maybe a difficult question that shouldn't be asked during a live conversation, but more so beforehand.
Any sources I can't find, I will provide to you.
Yeah, because sources are important on this, because this has always been a huge argument from the left that we need, to empty prisons more. We need to make sentences less long. We need to do this and that, make it harder for people to be sentenced to jail. And every time we look at the data, you can watch, there's a lot of videos from guys like Nuance Bro or Actual Justice Warrior who do a lot of work on crime, recidivism,
I'm sorry, keep that going. Hold on. I need to read this off. Dude's logic and reasons is obviously affected by emotions revealed by frequent cursing and interruptions. First of all, I'm a rude asshole when I debate unintentionally, and I'm trying to be better because Lauren got really interrupted last time we talked. I'm trying to do it a lot less. But two, I cuss a lot. I'm sorry. It's been ingrained in me since my mom and then the Marines. I can't help it. So don't psychoanalyze me. That's very silly. I apologize for interrupting you. It's my emotions. It's tainted everything along. Please continue.
I'd say for being opposing ideologies, but this is a pretty polite conversation. What was I even saying? Damn it.
I'm sorry. It just I couldn't pause it and it was scrolling.
No.
You put it on my screen. I wish I hadn't seen it.
Oh, right. Yeah. So there are all of these policies put in place to try to help the criminal. We want less crime, we want less people in jail. The focus is rarely less crime for some reason, even though that's shooting through the roof right now, and always on how can we get less people in jail? How can we improve the criminal's life? And every time these Democrat-run cities put in these policies that are trying to help the criminal, crime shoots through the damn roof, right? When we want to keep less people in jail, we find there's more people committing crime in the street. And that is the natural conclusion of almost every single proposal of these bills to reduce people in jail. So that I would definitely need the data to show, hey, less people in jail, through counseling, through this or that, is really going to help the taxpayer, because it doesn't really matter if you're saving on taxes if your business is getting robbed every other day, right?
So it's a very complex question you ask, because on one hand, you made the point that you're kind of getting to the point that there are.
Sorry, I'm going to interrupt you now to compliment you. Kevin Wang just did a $20 super chat saying you've been very civil. Thank you.
I'm happy to.
All right, go ahead. I'll read the rest in a minute.
Getting you that dollar. Okay, so can I have 2 seconds?
Yep.
To get my food? I'll be right back.
Awesome. I'll read super chats while you're getting your Szechuan chicken. Archeon says chemical castration could be used on an innocent man who will now never have kids. You can't reverse it. Yeah, that's the one issue that I have with things like the death penalty, chemical castration, that stuff, is it really, really has to be one of those cases of, beyond a reasonable doubt. It has to be something with CCTV camera that is like, it has a ton of witnesses. There's no question about it. If there's any question at all, even a smidge of doubt, then, no way, because the innocent do get falsely accused. We know this. This is a popular phenomenon, unfortunately, today. Okay, wait, I missed a few super chats. Revco says, I always find it amusing when someone that knows nothing about working in a prison suddenly becomes an expert. Work as a CO, then you can talk. Yeah, there's a lot of people that got degrees in comfy universities and did their assignments all day in an apartment that daddy paid for them and have never even dealt with a criminal or had a crime committed against them in their entire lives, have a lot to say about what we should do about criminals. And I do find that funny as well. All right. Gray said, this guy has never been a victim of violent crime, clearly.
Well, so what I'd say to that is, what do you want to happen to the criminals that offend against you? Do you want retribution or do you want reform? Do you want them to be punished by separation from society, removal of freedoms? And then do you want them, when released back into society, because they're not getting a life sentence for just beating your ass, do you want them to not redo that crime?
Actually, someone just had a great suggestion. Leon said, the way to lower prison population is to use the death penalty about 1,000 times more often and carry out the sentence much quicker too. Proven criminals like Dylan Roof should be executed within 30 days. Yeah, you know what? For people like Dylan Roof, Christchurch shooter, these kind of people where it's like they're literally like live streaming what they did, see ya. I'm sorry, and it's not even about for me, on a Christian level, it's not even about like, oh, I hope their soul is damned to hell forever. This might sound crazy to people, but I genuinely hope in those 30 days that they're waiting to be executed, they have a come to God moment and find their soul back to a place where they have like a deep, deep regret about what they did and beg for forgiveness, right? And I hope that for them. But no, not a single person who had a family member be shot by these maniacs should be having to pay for them to stay alive in a prison cell for the rest of their life. And I don't think there's anything anti-Christian about that. I don't think so.
So the only thing I'd say is I don't want to go down the death penalty debate because that's another 3-hour conversation.
Sure.
But so what I was going to say before I left, you were making the point, you're talking about rapists. Now, the one thing I'll say is I do think that we ought to, from a grade school level, have conversations about consent because there are all different types of forms of rape. And there are a lot of guys that they think that pumping a girl full of drinks is an acceptable way to loosen her up, And there are types of behaviors like that are learned intrinsically through media or watching other people that are bad. And having conversations about consent and better understanding how to read people, and that's a two-way street, right? People should be able to communicate what they are and are not into.
Yeah.
And people should be able to be mindful of that. So I do think those things ought to be taught. But what I will say, and I think what you were ultimately getting at, is rapists are going to rape no matter what.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, no matter what level of that we do, there will be rapists that rape in spite of knowing it's wrong, right? So, apologies, I'm going to pick my teeth because this shit gets all in them. So with that, there are always going to be criminals. But there are a lot of criminals that are criminals because of circumstance, because of upbringing, because of environment, and many that get put in for simple things like marijuana possession or something like that. People that aren't actually offending like in a violent manner, but maybe have technically done something wrong. This is where I talk about like the over enforcement of certain laws in certain communities. Don't want to get on that debate again. But once they end up in prison, the prison being what it is, turns these people into worse criminals than they were before. That is a very well documented.
I agree with that. When you put someone away for like marijuana possession or something, and then they're left with a criminal record, they can't get certain jobs. They feel like their life is basically ruined. They have no opportunity left. I guess I'm just doomed to a life of crime. I think that has been a horrific thing, and I am not a fan of the war on drugs personally. So I'm not going to disagree with you on that one.
So what happens then? So when I'm talking about like reducing, prison population, reducing taxpayer money, think of it, it's an exorbitant cost to put each individual in prison. Marijuana laws alone, as soon as the drug war ends, we decriminalize all these drugs and people aren't, being put away for possession of minor shit. The prison population is going to drop drastically.
Mm-hmm.
Your tax dollars are going to go down. And you know what? The level of tax dollars that are going to go down just off that drug war shit alone.
Well, no, I don't think people's taxes will go down. I think they'll come up with some other excuse.
Yes,
but
right, but
the government will save some money, sure.
well, what I mean is like people are complaining. It's like my tax dollars paying for it.
Yeah.
Dog, you're paying those taxes no matter what, right? So at the very least, we should
but
try
it
to
feels
put these
pretty
things
shit when the government are wasting it on things like.
You say wasting, but again, like if these things are, if we've proven that,
I think you would agree that the government spending money on keeping someone in prison for minor marijuana possession is a waste of your money.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, there we go. That's what I mean. That's what I mean by
huge waste. But so my point is that it's silly to get like really hung up on the idea that like my tax dollars are paying for this criminal to get counseling and education. It's like, yeah, but you know what? That fucker isn't going to go back into society. That guy, we think about like the intersectionality of all these problems. That guy isn't going to go back to someone's neighborhood, make that neighborhood worse, and then help create new criminals. That person isn't going to enlist other people to join them in their criminal activity. There are going to be people, people get real hung up. This is something that I, as a liberal, get annoyed with. Like people get real hung up on these small little individual cases of something happening, and then they want big, sweeping, drastic change for it. Well, you know what? On that, like if you guys are so upset about these people getting out of jail and doing a crime to another individual, we should probably make sure that they don't do that again, and giving them the resources available.
You still have not provided any evidence that giving counseling is going to stop criminals from committing crime.
Well,
I think that's the crisis. And education, counseling and education, because a lot of people get free education in America and still commit crime. Like it's not.
They get what? I'm sorry. The
free education in America, they're for a large portion of their life, and they still commit crime.
Criminals are going to be created by society.
Mm-hmm.
There are always going to be criminals. There are going to be those who are just inherently violent, vicious, uncaring, sociopathic, whatever. But then we do have to acknowledge that there are things that create criminals in our world. There are circumstances, there are actions that, like we can go with the drug war policy. That's one of the easiest ones. We can look at marijuana laws, mandatory minimum sentences. Those are things that inevitably create more violent criminals than there would have been before. So that's something within the justice system. But like even in our day to day, we talk about certain, people want to say, oh, that's a bad neighborhood. Well, cool. What's being done to fix that neighborhood? And then we'll get in the sidetracked argument about, what is and isn't the responsibility of those communities themselves versus what, we could do to help fix it in other places. But the point is that those areas create criminals, not necessarily because certain type of people are bad, but because certain circumstances lead to people having bad outcomes.
Sure. Okay. Like
being one of them.
Here's the thing that I have a problem with a lot of progressives is they'll describe problems that do exist. Sometimes they'll be dishonest and, bring up statistics about, race and crime that aren't necessarily properly portrayed. But when people complain about something, usually there's a grain of truth that can be found from it. And there are progressives that talk about, issues with growing up, bad families, bad neighborhoods that create a cyclical problem of crime. And it's true. But the problem is usually like how they go about trying to fix it and the solutions never really coming to fruition or working. I was watching a video by AJW that he published a few days ago about a leftist organization that was started to help victims of violent, partner family violence or whatever. And they started getting all up in the social justice world. They really wanted to do what's the word, like critical analysis of how they were approaching domestic violence. So they decided to stop informing the domestic violence survivors to call the police because that was a white supremacist response. Then they decided to start paying their black employees more and educating the victims of intimate partner violence.
Get a lot of agreement here when it comes to
but this is
the left, like mishandling the approach. To a problem.
So they started educating the the women who had just gone through intimate partner violence on how they needed to be more racially sensitive and how they were partaking in a system of white supremacy. And they started having conversations about how they needed to potentially demote Jewish employees because they think they might be white. And it was like just wild. In fact, there's
you on face value because I haven't seen any of this, but I've seen enough liberal craziness that I'll believe you. I can just say, that's fucking absurd. So the left has a huge problem with being able to identify a thing and then poorly executing the solution. The crime bill is a great example, even though it was bipartisan and shit was crazy in the fucking 90s. And like, there's that empathy part that's like, I get it. They needed to do something. Shit was bad. Poor thought out execution creates more criminals and doesn't really help society out as a whole. Yeah. Absolutely.
So there's an active lawsuit against the organization by one of the Jewish employees. You can watch it. Yeah, you can watch a video on it by Actual Justice Warriors, like 3 videos ago of his or something. But Yeah, I'm glad we agree on that. So when you talk about, bringing in a more progressive approach, bringing in education, bringing in counselors, I think a lot of people like me have all those alarm bells go off in our head that are like, I have a feeling this is going to go the route that every other progressive, let's counsel people on critical thought route goes.
Well, is it because it feels counterintuitive to say, let's take these criminals and give them positive benefits? I assume that there's a positive connotation with free counseling, free education, multitude of other free resources. I assume that psychologically just feels like a dissonant thing when you think of criminal justice system. It's like, you're supposed to be punished. Why are you getting these things?
Yeah, there is a part of my brain that I do think is like the more reptile part that responds with, no, like, no way. I do not want, F you. I don't want good things to happen to you. You're a bad person, of course. And I have to recognize and set that aside, that's like the, part of my brain that just wants to see someone eaten by the lions. Now, when I bring it over to the logical,
addressing implicit bias.
When I talk about like the logical side of my brain, for me, once again, it's just about what is actually going to work. And you have yet to provide data, and I don't expect you to, but I'm going to have a natural skepticism looking at the track record of democratic and progressive responses to crime, that this is actually going to reduce crime. Because right now it seems like being not as tough on criminals, it seems like giving them more chances to get out of jail has just created more victims.
So, do you hit your kid? If you may,
no,
you mind me asking you that. Do you know why we ought not hit our kids?
I think I think that you should be able to have a conversation with your child and have a debate. But I do think there are situations where I would say it's probably okay. Like if your kid keeps running into the street and they can't speak yet, like you could probably give them a slap and like on the butt or something, because it's like you have no other way to communicate and they're going to kill themselves. Like
absolutely. And the reality is, I say this as a kid who grew up with a grandma and mom that were freely hitting you with a wooden spoon.
Yeah.
I know your audience is probably going to have a lot of people that are really offended by the idea of like anyone implying that a spanking isn't a good punishment.
I was spanked as a kid, and I actually think it was a good thing for me. But there's I don't really want to go that route.
And I can easily find you data on this. Do I have the links right now? No.
Yeah.
But I assume that you are aware. I'm sorry. I'm trying to not sound condescending. Mm-hmm. Are you aware that it has been shown that the negative reinforcement of hitting leads to negative behaviors in people as they grow up?
I was friends with Stefan Molyneux. Do I know about the data on spanking? I do, yeah.
Oh, is he an anti-spanking
he's
guy?
very, very anti-spanking, yeah.
Okay, cool. So you would agree with me. I've said parents shouldn't be hitting their kids.
Yeah, certainly if you can have a logical conversation with them about their actions and find other routes, of course, yeah.
It teaches emotional maturity.
Yeah.
It teaches the ability to communicate, and it tends to get better results.
Yeah.
So even without me finding the data, could you not see how that type of engagement with the criminal population could lead to positive results? Not even saying like anything about 100%, 90%, 80%, 50%. I'm just saying, could you not logically follow that would lead to the same thing when treating criminals?
I mean, I think when you're dealing with children and adults, the data would be very, very different. I think it's comparing apples and oranges, and that's not necessarily. And when we're talking about violent offender adults versus a child that, forgot to wash their dishes, it's just, just not even in the same realm of comparison, in my opinion.
I can't think of anything off the top of my head, so you can just hand wave this if you think it sounds like bullshit. But I've read different historical accounts, of people in captivity or people being treated certain ways in, concentration camps or POW camps or whatever, that the way they are treated impacts the way they behave amongst each other. Mm-hmm. And some things create more camaraderie. Some things create divisiveness and violence. And, even against those that are their comrades or people that they shouldn't be angry against. Mm-hmm. Excuse me. So it's just with that, with the data on negative reinforcement against humans.
Yeah, it was a really good idea to schedule your dinner during a debate.
Sorry, I eat way too fast. I don't chew my food, and so I belch. I eat like a killer whale, just get it down there. Yeah. So anyway, like that doesn't logically flow to you. That doesn't like intrinsically feel like a.
Once again, I'd have to see the data because all I'm going off of is what we see in the result of democratic policies trying to reduce prison population. I'm not saying currently having like a super high prison population is a good thing. I don't think it is. I think that it's horrific. The war on drugs, all that has happened. But like the democratic response seems to be even worse for like just average people that get victimized by rampant criminality in the cities.
So I realize that is very unsatisfying, probably to not only your audience, but the few people that are watching me just talking about like feelings, right? Because I don't like making decisions.
I'm not like other conservatives Lycan, okay? I don't believe facts don't care about your feelings. I think emotion and feelings are what motivate human beings, and conservatives' abandonment of trying to even remotely understand this aspect of the human experience and communicate to it has been catastrophic for the conservative movement and our connection with other people and being able to communicate our ideas. So no, I think it's okay to talk about emotion, but that doesn't mean that our emotions shouldn't also be informed by facts.
So I agree. My question is, when I provide you, when I get you the statistics on this or the studies and all that, are we going to have a source debate?
We can have a source debate.
No. Are we going to have a source debate? Like if I show you the National Institute of Health.
Yes, but send it to me before we talk, and I'll send you my stuff before we talk, because I think that you don't want to be going over studies on stream. You want to read them.
Like I'm not going to do anything now. Yeah.
So we can chat on Monday or next Thursday and go over some of the studies and suggestions you have. People in chat calling me a vapist. Can you just go away, okay? You know what? I've had enough of you. I do have some super chat questions for you here. So they've brought up some interesting stuff. First, oh man, how far back?
This is first for me. I've never had people donate to ask me a question.
Wow, you're so popular now, Lycan. Look at this. Don't forget us little people when you're big out there. Coattails. Yeah. Flog them with scorpions. It's the epitome of justice, says Don't Care. Leon says the way to lower... already read that one. Bob Hill says the privatization of prisons is one of the worst things America has done. It's pushed along the plea deal justice system to keep private prisons packed. Yep, I'd agree with that. Geoff Schatz, reducing crime means improving opportunities to succeed without crime. High taxes, minimum wage laws, and excessive government control do the opposite. Revco says there are two kinds of criminals, those that can learn from their mistakes and those that cannot. There are tons of programs in jail and prisons already. They do not work on those that don't want help. That's kind of my approach and belief. Like it has to be people that want it.
I want to respond to that real quick, and then I have a thought. I think it's very hard to say these, first of all, because there's no standardization across the prison system in America, right? Just from county to county, let alone state to state or federal, we're going to have different ways of handling these prisoners. But until we create an environment that is free of those things we talked about before, the violence and the assaults and all that stuff, the criminality within the system, until that's gone, it's going to be very hard for us to accurately say why. Like if you can just go to what you know, you just came off the streets, you're going to go to what you know, you're going to get within your group of people, and you're going to lean into that lifestyle, and it's uncool or whatever, and you have friends without all those other programs, you're less likely to engage with them. So if prison's a much more mundane and less fucking crazy place,
there is something to that. I'll give you that. Because I think people take for granted that some criminals love crime. Like they don't do it because they're desperate,
and not necessarily just because they're evil. Some people like being in gangs because those gangs provided a sense of community and family they didn't have because they grew up in a shitty place.
But then once again, you're talking about a punishment. You're talking about punishing them by taking them out of something they love. So it's still, you're saying that punishment. Okay, well, you're still suggesting that punishment results in...
You know what? if removing them from a gangland lifestyle is punishment, if preventing them from getting fucking raped by their fellow man or a guard is punishment, well, you know what? That's a punishment I'm okay with.
Okay. Kevin Wang says, Marcus Henry says, I don't believe in crimes that have no victim. They really should be based off of aggressors. There are so many crimes that have no victim. Wait. There are so many.
I mean, sure. You know, you steal an ATM machine. Technically, it has no victim except the taxpayer that has to pay for the FDIC insured, bank machine. I don't know if the FDIC insures banks ATMs, but you get my point. Like, technically, it's victimless, but I still think you need to be punished for that shit.
Okay, sorry. Next one. I'll let you respond to all of these. Kevin Wang says, how much I'd be happy to pay in taxes for counseling is entirely a function of how effective it would really be. And I doubt it'd be effective enough to be a net tax decrease. That's actually my opinion on this too. It's entirely based on the effectiveness. For me, if I set aside the emotion, which by the way, I would not ask someone who is the victim of a violent crime or had a family member that was a victim of a violent crime to set aside the emotion. I recognize as someone commentating from afar, it is a lot easier to set aside the emotion and think logically about it, but the emotion matters. But yeah, it's entirely about how effective that would be.
Well, before you go to the next one, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Before I forget it. Before they've even been tried, before a lot of these criminals even go to court, they get provided a public defender. Mm-hmm. Public defenders are, like how fucked the public defender system is in America. Okay. So what if I said, I want more tax dollars going to public defenders to get them better trained, to incentivize good lawyers to be public defenders, to take on more cases, and to increase the number of public defenders available so that they're actually able to focus on the cases rather than just getting the best deal and keeping their people off death row.
I actually do agree with that. I think all the money that we send to Ukraine should go to our own justice system.
Okay, you didn't have to further politicize the already political thing. We agree. No, it was a good moment. Let's not.
No, but I agree. One of the biggest problems with our legal system, Canada, America, doesn't really matter is the fact that how much money you have will usually decide how much jail time you get. How much money you have will decide what your punishment is. And that's wild. That's not justice at all. Whether it be for defamation, libel cases, which I've had to deal with in the courts. And basically it's like, oh, you don't have enough money? Well, too bad, so sad. Or on an even more serious level, death penalty or prison. You should absolutely be given representation that is good, well-trained, is going to be able to put up a proper defense for you. And we should be focusing more on that than foreign wars.
Yeah, well, we agree for the majority of that. So it's good. Yeah. We have some common ground. So It's not just necessarily about spending the money. It's just once they get in, the belief is that, are you really worth that money?
I Drive Pro says, you reduce the number of prisoners by making a prison so terrifying that breaking the law isn't a feasible option. Basically, be decent people to start with. That starts with a better moral compass and better intelligent laws.
I am morally and emotionally opposed to that entire statement.
I agree. Even the last bit where he says the problem is with our moral compass and people not being decent. I think that's where a lot of these problems come from, is the fact that you can put as many state punishments in as you want. You can make it as beneficial as you want to be the good guy or whatever. But we've got a general moral decay going on where people don't really care about treating other people kindly because they have no reason to.
I think that we have. There is an old scroll. I saw some article many years ago, and it was like some scroll was found or some tablet was found in ancient, some Roman ruins or something like that. And it basically said, these fucking kids are all they do is spend time at the pub and fuck and drink. And that's all they're doing. And it's like, there's a little bit of levity to that, to today's times, because it's like, okay, cool. There's always been a time where everyone has felt like the shit's going down and the world is ending and debauchery reigns supreme.
Yeah.
And that was in Rome, right? So
yeah, well, and their empire collapsed, and I think we're getting to the end of ours too.
Okay, let's not take the analogy too far. The point is that I think so. My problem with that would be is it's an oversimplification. If we're looking at the issue with these communities where more criminals are being produced or the criminals are thriving or whatever, it's another debate. But it's going to be a long conversation about all the things that we could do that we're not doing and all the things that have led to and enabled the cycle to continue. So I just think that to say that it's moral decay and no one gives a shit is a way oversimplification that just kind of handwaves a bunch of problems we ought to be addressing.
Chill with the Roman salutes there, Lycan.
What's a Roman salute? Is it the Nazi salute?
No, it's a Roman salute, okay?
But is it the Nazi salute?
The Romans started it, so it's the Roman salute.
And the swastika is a Tibetan good luck charm.
Absolutely. No. Tatsumi Twee says, everything the government declares war on gets worse. Terror, drugs, poverty, the Rona, and misinformation. That's so true, Tatsumi. Interstellar 408 says, listen to Colin Flaherty's free podcast on iHeartRadio for the true effects of criminal justice reform. He's the author of Don't Make the Black Kids Angry. Highly recommend by our, can't read that, Thomas Sowell. Our guy, Thomas Sowell. Colin Flaherty is really good. I had him in my documentary Crossfire. If you haven't watched it, go to LaurenSouthern.net and you can find it there. But yeah, he does great work on crime.
You fired the flares and they crossed over each other?
Yeah, that's what the whole movie is about. Damon Knight says, hey, my dad was butchered in his home in 2011 by a man who pretended to be his friend. I think the person who did it needs to die. What do you two think?
Well,
I'm pro death penalty, so where are you at, Lycan? The guy's in chat. His dad was butchered.
I don't believe the death penalty should exist. I think that just wanting another human being to die as punishment is now, first of all, let me just say genuinely, someone who's lost his father as well, I am sorry for your loss. And I know what it's like to lose a parent and to lose one so suddenly. I've also know that, but not in your circumstance. And I am very sorry that you went through that. But that doesn't change my feelings about the death penalty, which is that I believe that just the fact that I think it's estimated like 1.9% of death row inmates are wrongfully on death row. That alone to me is too much. I fully believe in the one innocent. I will let 9 criminals go free for one innocent to be saved. I fully believe that. And I apply that to the death penalty. But furthermore, with how significant that even despite losing my faith, I believe the existence of our lives is on this planet. I just don't believe that we should, outside of war, be taking those lives. And I just think it's the fact that people feel the impetus, like that person, like a family member of mine, for the person that went and threatened Kavanaugh. The person was talking to me on the phone. They're like, he should be getting she was bitching about liberals, and she was like, he should be getting the chair. I didn't tell her how upset I was because it's a family member, and there's no getting through to this person. But like, it really fucking upsets me that like the first thought is, fuck them. I want them to die. And it's like, well, if we don't want criminals to be thinking about the death of others or engaging in the death of others, what better are we if we're like, yeah, but we have a good justification. So
I mean, I respect your logic there. I still, I think in cases where it's absolutely undeniable what has happened, that the death penalty is a acceptable option. But I respect your view that you would let 10 free to save one. I would generally feel the same way, and that's why I would only apply this to the most absolutely undeniable cases. And I also, I respect the notion of leading by example as well, even if I don't necessarily feel it always works out in practice. And once again, my approach to this is what works in practice, what saves the most lives, what results in the most peace. And I extend my sympathies to the individual who lost his father that sent that chat. And also, I had a few people in chat mention that Colin Flaherty has actually passed away. I did not know that. He was very kind and very courteous in being in my documentary, very thoughtful, and that's a great shame. It's a sad thing to hear. So thank you, chat, for letting me know, and I extend my condolences to his friends and family.
Was that a friend?
He was just an individual that I'd spoken to a few times and had come on to talk to me for my film, but he was a kind guy and a very thoughtful, talented man. So I had no idea that he passed away recently. Ben Darling said, what do you think about corporal punishment? A short, sharp, cheaply administered shock, which would nonetheless be feared, then rehabilitation after.
What?
He said, what do you think about corporal punishment? A short, sharp, cheaply administered shock, which would nonetheless be feared, and then rehabilitation after. So like the idea of,
So like using violence, like the pain.
So
I don't believe in torture.
I think that there no, I think that there can be cases where that makes sense. So like let's say you're at a bar and your mate's being a dickhead and he won't leave these women alone. He's grabbing them, he's just being a twit, and you punch him in the face, you drag him out, take him home, and then the next day you sit down and have a real heart-to-heart, man to man with him. I think that's not always the worst option. Some people do need a good punch in the face, I think. But in Minecraft, Susan Wojcicki.
I'm not a huge fan of violence, unnecessary violence. Like my amount for violence is like you're stopping something bad from happening or you're in a war. So just it feels to my sensibilities like something I would rather them just have their liberties taken away and separated from society for some amount of time than inflicting pain. Even if it's just like, oh cool, you get pain, but now you're going to go to counseling and you'll get better. It's like, give them the time. I'd rather them spend the time away than have the pain.
Okay. Bob says, last super. Sometimes mercy to the guilty is a crime to the innocent. Heard that a long time ago. Interesting.
To me, that just it sounds like vengeance. It sounds like you want the satisfaction of punishment.
It depends on how it's applied. Like there is something to J.R. Tolkien always applied the concept in his books of, the truly brave and the truly wise know not just when to take a life, but when to spare one, right? And I think that there's a lot of truth to that. Like, can you have forgiveness? Can you choose when you are just acting in vengeance? Can you decide when you are just acting on emotion and hatred? Versus can you distinguish when you are acting in a just manner to protect other people? And for me, violence should be used in a just manner to protect others. I'd agree with you. And I do think there are circumstances in which it can be used as punishment for crime. And I do think there are circumstances where people are merely committing violence for, a masturbatory effect because they just want to see others writhe in pain. And there's a difference between those two things. And it's important to distinguish that. So I don't know if you'd agree with that. Another person kind of on the same side, J Solar 590 said, reforming criminals dishonors victims.
Again, that just same sentiment. And like go off the Tolkien, when Frodo sees Gollum and it says it's a pity that Bilbo didn't kill him, and Gandalf says it was pity that stayed Bilbo's hand. Many who have life deserve death. Many that die deserve life. Can you give it to them? Then don't be so quick to deal out death and judgment. And I think a lot of people, sounds like from those two that just said that, it just sounds like they just want people that do bad to feel pain or to die.
So this is what I would say, though. There's a difference. I think that there's also like a very easy judgment that comes from people that would never be willing to commit violence in their entire life. So they would never be able to protect family. They would never be able to go to war. I know you're a Marine, so you've got that experience. So I kind of respect your opinion on all of this a little more. But there are a lot of people who act like they are brave or act like they have some sort of moral superiority because, I'm compassionate. I would never hurt another human being. But the truth is they actually just never had the capability in the first place, right? They never had the gut or willpower or any of that to sometimes do what is necessary or needs to be done. And I think mercy and compassion from someone who could otherwise be very willing and very capable to punish or protect is a far more meaningful sentiment than from the mass hordes of liberals who demand compassion but know nothing of actually enforcing any sort of standards within society in the first place.
Well, I think it's like both sides. I hate saying that word, phrase. Both sides are going to fuck it up. Liberals are going to overcorrect for some injustice perceived or proven out in data. They're going to try to overcorrect for it. And then I think conservatives on the other end are going to, over adjust as well. I think both sides are going too far. I think that conservatives take their idea of justice to a level that I don't obviously have borne out that I don't agree with through our conversation. And I think the liberals are going to not be thoughtful and just try to do all the good, feel good stuff and not accept that. Yes, some people do need to experience punishment and you can't just completely do away with that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, a few other. Artemisia says, one of the biggest problems with this conversation is the type of criminal is being left out. Counseling will work on the lower to mid-violent criminals, but not on the most violent and rapist type. I think there's something to that. You really have to consider the type of crime committed.
Absolutely. I don't disagree, but I think that at the end of the day, I do think everyone should get a chance. Even if they're fucking spending their life in prison, I still think that, we shouldn't want them to remain whatever wretched human being they are.
I agree. Kevin Wang says criminals were treated nice in society and they still decided to crime it up.
What?
He said criminals were treated nice in society and they still decided to crime it up. I think alluding to the many democratic cities that are very lenient on crime. Certainly the ones.
Well, it's like one of those things where it's like, cool, the Democrats did one thing, which was they lessened certain things that lessened the enforcement of certain crimes or whatever, and crime rates go up. It's like, well, cool, because for both the right and left, you failed to address the root of the problems in those areas. So it's like, cool, now you've stopped it from being enforced, and sure, maybe a few extra criminals aren't on the streets now because they didn't go to jail for some dumb thing and then come out worse, but you still haven't addressed the cause of crime.
Revco, this is to you, talking about the prison system. He says, your false virtue aside, you have never worked in or been in the system. It's really easy to point a finger, but you have to live it to understand it.
I mean, is he talking about being in the jail?
Prison system, working as a prison guard or being a prisoner. I think there's, whoever's talking about it, even me, if you haven't worked it or lived it, you are not going to have the same depth of analysis as someone who has. And I think it would be worthwhile to probably have someone who has been in and worked in the system to come on and talk to us. Perhaps next time, if you can find someone like it, I'll also take
Absolutely.
a look. I think that would be really interesting and worthwhile.
So the one thing I'll say to that, is just that there are certain things that you don't need to have experience with. And this is something that I think, I argue a lot with people on the fucking left, is everyone is like,
I don't agree with that.
Give deference to experience. Like, there are certain things that you don't need to experience to know are wrong.
Okay.
Murder is wrong. Rape is wrong. And none of that shit should be happening at the hands of guards or at the permission of guards or in the prison population. It shouldn't be happening.
But
in
I think it's more so about your depth of analysis of what could fix it. That's probably.
If he's talking about that, then we can.
Yeah.
We'll have more of a discussion about that. Yeah.
Marcus Henry says whoever owned the ATM would be the victim. Victimless crimes I'm talking about is things like renewing your tags and drugs. Civilian and cop altercations increase the more senseless laws you have. I absolutely agree with that. Lil Pimp Juice 96 says, I'm fine with gangbangers. Sorry, I don't even understand what you wrote there. My boy was popped a few times by one in Houston. Emotions over facts on this case, though. Kevin Wang says, what flavor is your vape? Lemon, I think. Damon Knight, yeah, it is basic. It's actually pumpkin spice latte.
I guarantee that exists.
Yeah, Damon Knight says, fair enough. I sort of agree. Thanks for the reply. No worries, Damon. Thanks for the chat. Crack Bandicoot says, some people would rather take some pain than lose their freedom for any given amount of time. This was the motive that drove many people to get vaccinated. Waka waka. Let's see if there's any more. Okay, that was the last one. So I think I'm probably going to wrap this up since I've got real life to go back to. I got some grass to touch. Oh, wait, one more. Mini Eater says, are you okay with violence to take taxes from people, Lycan?
Absolutely.
Oh. Taxation is theft, team? By the way, no. That's a difficult. That's a.
I am not a. I'm not a
it's
libertarian.
theft. It's theft if they use my money to give counseling to rapists. Then it's theft. But if they're using it to put them away, then it's not theft. My opinion.
One of the arguments I'm so glad I let go of after not being conservative was the idea. Fuck. I'm so sorry. That delicious bite of fucking beef. I forgot what I was going to say. What did you just say?
Wonderful. I love when beef makes you forget your debunks of your old conservative ideology. No, basically, I do have to wrap up this chat, but were there any last things you wanted to say, last points you wanted to get out of your system, your horrible, libtarded soul really needs to get off your chest?
We did so well, and then you just, you got to be a conservative,
Oh, got him. All right, demo KK Krat.
No, I enjoyed the chat. I appreciate you you taking some time.
Yeah, absolutely. And where can people actually no, you don't get to plug your socials. You post way too much inappropriate stuff on your Twitter. What do you have like a live stream channel?
No, at Lycan GTV on
Lycan GTV. All right.
On Twitch.
Oh, Twitch. Yeah, I'm not banned from Twitch. Otherwise, it would have been fun to lie to you and get you banned. But
No, I appreciate it, and thank you guys for all the questions. It was really good interacting with you all, and yeah, let's do this again.
Yeah, this was fun. Let's definitely do a follow up. I'll see if there's anyone I can get that's worked in either. I do have a few professors and people that I had
already willing to come on.
Crossfire. Oh, counterpoints would be really fun to have. Connor, because he worked as a police officer for a while.
Absolutely.
Okay, wait. Last super chat here, Thunderstorm. If you super chat after this, Lycan's going to be gone, all right? It'll only be me answering for like 5 more minutes. Are we overlooking solutions to problems in general trapped in this left-right paradigm? I've seen other ideologies in history with better ideas and number that can't be discussed. I agree with that. Yeah, I think the left-right paradigm does absolutely limit our ability to address issues when all aspects of one approach can only be Democrats and all aspects of another approach can only be Republicans, and you better fall into that category 100%, otherwise you're going to be kicked from the party. Oh no, Destiny just raided, and I'm about to leave. Lycan, say something liberal to make them happy.
I think one of the problems with when we talk about left-right divide, though, is that the right is going to be intrinsically averse to any kind of like compassionate solutioning.
I don't think that's true. I just think the individuals that they're compassionate towards are different. The left are more compassionate towards the criminal, and the right are more compassionate towards the victim.
Well,
and we can see that. We can see that in that video I played earlier, where the woman who was getting shot at by this criminal was being yelled at in the streets by protesters, telling her to shut up and that she didn't have bullet holes full of her, so she better in her kids, so she better just forget about it, right? So you can see that lack of compassion towards the victim because it's inconvenient to the leftist narrative there. And then you can definitely see a lack of compassion for people that may have had complicated lives and gotten into a life of crime from the right.
I'm not even talking about just our discussion today about crime. I'm talking about in general. If you want to talk about issues with the Native American population in the United States, if you wanted to talk about issues with the Black community, if you wanted to talk about certain issues with police reform and things like that, like the compassionate avenue is very rarely the one that conservatives want to take. I
disagree because conservatives...
there's a lot about like individual responsibility and take responsibility for your own actions and very little consideration for all the intersectional aspects of being alive in society that impact these, and have you give a little deference to those.
Have you ever seen the movie Everything Everywhere All at Once?
Not yet. Please don't spoil it.
I need to spoil it for this example, but there's one point in the movie where...
No, hold on, no.
It's not going to have a spoiler. Relax. There's one point in the movie where two different people with two different approaches to life suddenly understand each other. And they understand that it's not a lack of care. It's not a lack of compassion from the other person. And for a long time, they both thought it was, but it's just a different approach to that care and compassion. And for conservatives, oftentimes they'll feel compassion. They won't always communicate it because there is definitely a messaging within the conservative sphere that, communicating emotion can seem weak and unnecessary in the political, but of course they still feel it. And their approach to doing that is to find what they perceive to be the logical solution. I am going to, because I feel compassion in this society, I am going to do what most logically is going to reduce the amount of crime, what most logically is going to improve society the most. And it may seem cold, it may seem like they don't care, but their approach to politics is simply different, and how they view being compassionate is different. It's kind of like the different love languages. You have people that think acts of service is love, whereas one person may desperately desire words of affirmation, which I think is probably more of a progressive thing. So it's not that they don't have compassion, it's just that they approach it in a very different way than progressives do.
We will table that, and we'll continue
that table that
on our next one. Yes, because it's another hour of talk.
Okay. All right. Lycan, it was great to chat with you. I'm really looking forward to our chat either next Thursday or the week after, depending on when you're free. But go check out Lycan. What's your Twitch handle?
I never stream. Don't even worry about me. I'm just a figure who appeared for a bit.
We'll just chat with Lycan again another time. All right. God bless. Have a good one, man.
Bye, lady.